Constructed Criticism is sponsored by Oasis Games. MTGOasis.com is the place to get cards for your next Magic event. Try them out with code CCMTG for 15% off of your first order, and use the code WouldThatBeGood for 4% off of every order. Want to support the show directly? Head on over to patreon.com/CCMTG to check out some awesome benefits and future goals for the show. Thanks for listening, and here's this week's episode of Constructed Criticism. Hello everybody, and welcome to a video on the Constructed Criticism YouTube channel, or if you're listening at home, on the Constructed Criticism Podcast Network. I'm your host Spencer, and I'm joined by a special guest, Mason Clark from the Even Odds Podcast. How's it going, Mason?
Doing great, Spencer. Glad to be here. It feels like just yesterday we were doing this.
Yeah, at least 30 seconds ago we were already talking about this deck.
Yeah, it's an exciting deck. It's hard not to talk about Amulet Titan.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about Amulet Titan, which is a deck that I've been wanting to talk about on the network for quite a while. I think that the deck has been strong. I know Michael Hinderocker won states with the deck back in right when he first joined the podcast. And
pour one out from the Hinderocker.
Yeah. How dare he get a job at WotC? But Mason, you just went and played this deck to qualify for an invitational by winning an IQ.
Yeah, I've been picked up the deck back at the end of November, early December, so I've been playing it for a couple months now, and I think the deck is really strong, even with the changes with KCI leaving the format, which I know some people thought would maybe make this deck's position change, but with the way the decks have popped up currently to attack the metagame, you actually... There's the meme on Twitter, if you're part of Magic Twitter, which is the deck has no bad matchups, but of the top 5 decks, you only have one bad matchup, really. So the deck is very well positioned right now, and it's a very powerful choice, and I think that it's not as hard as people make it out to be once you learn some of the basic stuff. So hopefully we can go over that a little bit today as well.
Yeah, so the list will be in the show notes, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening to this in podcast form. Why don't you go ahead and read the deck list for our listeners at home, though?
Sure. So for creatures, we have 1 Walking Ballista, 2 Sakura-Tribe Scout, 4 Azusa, Lost But Seeking, 2 Courser of Kruphix, 2 Trinket Mage, 2 Wayward Swordtooth. We'll come back to that. 4 Primeval Titan. We have 1 EE, 1 Pact of Negation, 4 Summoner Pact, 4 Amulet of Vigor, 4 Ancient Stirrings, and we have 29 lands, so buckle up. We got 1 Bojuka Bog, 1 Boros Garrison, 1 Cavern of Souls, 3 Forest, 4 Gemstone Mine, 1 Ghost Quarter, 2 Grove of the Burnwillows, 4 Gruul Turf, 1 Khalni Garden, 1 Radiant Fountain, 4 Simic Growth Chamber, 1 Slayers Stronghold, 1 Sunhome Fortress of the Legion, 3 Tolaria West, and 1 Vesuva. As for the sideboard, we have 1 Ramunap Excavator, 1 Reclamation Sage, 1 Tireless Tracker, 1 Thar the Unbowed, 1 Hornet Queen, 1 EE, 2 Tormod Script, 3 Abrade, 3 Negate, 1 Academy Runs.
So what is this deck trying to do to win a match of Magic?
So the main goal is to get a Titan in play. Now, hopefully you would want the card Amulet of Vigor to give your Titan haste and try and double strike it and kill them in one shot, assuming they fetch shocked. But really all you're trying to do every single turn is work towards getting a Titan in play, because once you have a Titan in play, it's normally pretty easy to win a game of Magic. Titan can go search up Tolaria West, which is a land that lets you transmute, and a Simic Growth Chamber, which basically leads to another Titan. So you either try and chain Titans, or if you have Amulet of Vigor in play, you'll get your Boros Garrison and your Slayers Stronghold, give your Titan haste, and then search up whichever lands are optimal, whether it be the double strike land at that point, or most commonly Tolaria West plus Simic Growth Chamber to get another Titan for the next turn.
Yeah, it seems like, between Tolaria West, Summoner's Pact, and Titan, you just have 12 Primeval Titans in your deck, it feels like.
Yeah, you have 11 because you only play 3 Tolaria West, which is something all the deck lists do. I've thought about playing with a 4th, but I really don't have anything I want to cut right now, but I think you could, in theory.
That's fair.
But yeah, you have a lot of Primeval Titans. It's funny because it's like, oh, if I draw a Titan, I win, and then you think about it, and you're like, oh, I'm like 20% to draw a Titan. That's insane. So, yeah.
So before we get into some of the key cards, I want to talk really quickly about what a toolbox deck is for those who don't know at home.
Yeah, so a toolbox deck is a deck that has a lot of different tools and cards that can attack different matchups. So let's use a couple examples for us in our lands, since Primeval Titan tutors our lands and helps us get these better matchups. So one of your best matchups if you're playing this deck is Dredge, because you have Bojuka Bog and you're able to bounce it with the bounce lands and keep destroying them. In fact, in round 4 of the IQ, I played against a Dredge player and I had Bojuka Bog in my opening hand, and the game was just over because they kind of auto-lost. So you have that kind of tool. You also have the card Ghost Quarter, which you can easily search up in order to beat up on Tron decks or opposing mirror matches. You have Radiant Fountain, which when it enters the battlefield, you gain 2 life. There's Kodama Crossroads if you play the White Splash, I believe it's the name of that card, but it's basically Radiant Fountain that's white and enters the battlefield tapped, which isn't a downside in this deck a lot of the time. And you just have these different tools that you have access to, and those tools allow you to approach a lot of different matchups and have game against them. And normally those decks would be like, I win game one because of this. For example, Burn is one of your good matchups because if you just draw your Radiant Fountain or your Courser of Kruphix, you have a huge advantage against them, and they're just not prepared to fight those battles, especially game one.
Yeah, gaining that little bit of life, that 2 life, they're expecting you to actually take damage from your lands, which this deck does not. So when you're actually gaining life from your lands, it can add up.
Yeah, and my top 8 match at the IQ, I knew my opponent was on Burn, and my hand was Forest, Radiant Fountain, Courser of Kruphix, and I was like, well, that's a keep. Like, I don't know how they win, and they just lost. So you don't even have to have particularly strong hands. If you can kind of abuse the land synergies when they're so effective against certain matchups, it really does, like, pressure people and make it really hard for them to actually kill you. And then eventually you have this, like, there are very few decks in the format that go later than you do, actually, which is weird since all you really do is put Primeval Titan where big idiots in play, but it just plays out that way.
Let's talk about your top 3 key cards really quick. What would you say is key card number 1?
So I'm gonna omit Amulet of Vigor and Primeval Titan since those are the obvious cards. You're playing a deck called Amulet Titan. So if you know those 3 cards aside, I think your most important cards are Wayward Swordtooth, Azusa Lost But Seeking, and Sakura-Tribe Scout. Those 3 cards really let you speed up and let you play this faster game plan.
Let's start with Azusa.
So Azusa Lost But Seeking is a 3-mana 1/2 human monk, very powerful. But what it allows you to do is play 2 extra land drops in a turn. So that lets you play 3 lands in a turn. So this is an interesting interaction with the Amulet deck. Is if you have Amulet in play, your lands there's a trigger that untaps them. So when you play one of your bounce lands like Simic, Growth Chamber, or Gruul Turf, part of the cost is you have to return a land from play to your hand. But they untap first if you stack your trigger, so you can float mana. So you can play Gruul Turf, float mana, and replay it, even though you only have 1 land, right? And you can play a Titan off that. So that's one interaction. Also, you can just develop your mana. If you're like, well, I can't play a Titan this turn where I don't have one, I want to work towards it, you can just play a Gruul Turf, bounce like your Radiant Fountain, replay your Radiant Fountain, gain 2 life, play another bounce land, bounce it back, and like, okay, I'm getting another 2 life next turn. And that buys you a lot of time towards finding a Titan. So Azusa Lost But Seeking really just helps you speed up and also have busted draws. In the finals, on turn 3, because I double Amulet, I played 2 Titans and a Courser of Kruphix and Azusa all in 1 turn because of that interaction.
That's crazy, man. Let's talk
insane.
about the sketcher of the deck, the Wayward Swordtooth.
Here's the thing about the deck. The deck has a lot of has a lot of things it can do that can be considered flex spots, right? The other cards, so the 2 spots where Swordtooth is used to be Sakura-Tribe Scout, but right now in the modern metagame, people are playing Gutshot main deck, and they are playing bolts all over the place. There are so many deal 3 damage or deal 1 damage incidentally. As such, Sakura-Tribe Scout's actually more of a liability than it is a strength. Sakura-Tribe Scout, in case you don't know, is 1 mana for a 1/1 Snake Shaman that says tap, put a land from your hand into play. So it essentially ramps you, very powerful with your bounce lands, also lets you get a little tricky at times, but it's basically a mana accelerant as long as you have lands. When you have 29 lands in your deck, that happens a lot. Wayward Swordtooth is a 3-mana 5/5 dinosaur from Standard that lets you play 1 extra land a turn. So while it isn't as fast as Sakura-Tribe Scout, it's more resilient and it lines up better with the metagame and plays a mini Azusa role, which is actually super important to the deck because a lot of times you aren't doing the thing I said where you just like play the same bounce land a bunch, float a bunch of mana, play a Titan, kill them. Other times you actually develop your mana, you draw your Titan, and then you kind of win from there. So having that extra land drop, especially with the bounce lands, is super important.
Awesome. Yeah, it's I'm just teasing it because of the Ascend thing. I don't think that you ever get to attack. It's almost an enchantment in the deck, right?
Yeah, I joked before that I played a 3-mana enchantment that lets me play an extra land that sometimes dies to removal. Like, like that's what it does. I will say that when it does turn on though is normally when you have a Primeval Titan, and in some matchups, like humans and stuff like that, you'll play and you're kind of racing to get a Titan before they can like stop you with a Meddling Mage or kill you. And then once you get a Titan, it normally turns on the dinosaur, and having the blocker is super important. And actually having the 5/5 against decks that don't have creatures is actually super important as well, because you can make your Titan attack for 16 a lot of the time very easily, but not like anymore. And 16 plus 5 is 21. So you can actually kill people through that, which it's actually come up more than I thought it would. And it's surprising how much it does.
Cool. Well, let's talk really quickly about the coolest interaction in the deck. So what do you think is the sweetness that we might not have mentioned already?
So we've mentioned the Azusa and the bounce lands. We mentioned all that kind of stuff. I would say that the coolest thing that this deck really does, and this is kind of weird, is abusing. It's weird. It abuses like the bounce lands. It takes that drawback and makes them a strength. And so I mentioned it a little bit when we talked about the toolbox aspect, but it really does play out where you play a Radiant Fountain and then you bounce it and then you replay the Radiant Fountain. And you like play a Khalni Garden, bounce it, replay Khalni Garden, and you make like 2 plants and you use those 2 plants to buy time. And there's a lot of cool things that you can do with those cards in order to buy time and just kind of slow your opponent down. And you would think that these bounce lands are a drawback and you don't want to play them in Modern, but when you have these other lands that work so well with it, it really does capitalize on something that a lot of people don't expect. And then I would say the one other big thing is that Primeval Titan like is just good enough. And this is something we learned from the Valakut decks kind of, but like sometimes just having a 6/6 is all you need to win in Modern, and it stops attacks and makes the opponent's aggression end immediately. So I would say that's the 2 coolest things, where people think that you're like this weird combo deck that always kills the opponent with like this one-shot Titan in 1 turn. Honestly, I didn't do that a whole lot. The craziest game I had was that the final game of the tournament where I played all those Titans in 1 turn. But most of the times I didn't even draw an Amulet. I just played the game out normally, and you slowly develop your mana, but you get to a 6/6 so quickly, and that's just good enough in current Modern.
So I have a question around Tolaria West. What percentage of the time is your Tolaria West and not looking for a Summoner's Pact? Like what time, when is it looking for an Engineered Explosives or a Walking Ballista, for example?
And Pact of Negation against combo decks. So the first one I would say that we did mention there is Pact of Negation is something else you can tutor up. You look for that normally if the game's pretty much locked up in opposing combo matchups, or if you're playing against control and you got the read on a cryptic command. It's very easy to tax them. We also have Cavern of Souls. But for you searching up Walking Ballista, it's actually normally against Jeskai Control or Infect and those kind of decks, or if you just need to like ping them out of the game, like you got them to 4, they passed your Titan or something, and you're like, okay, transmute a thing, shoot you. And then you search for EE a lot against creature decks or decks that have weird enchantments. Like if you play against, like I've played against the Pello Fort deck before, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna go search for an EE, put it on 3, and pop all these Ghostlight Prisons, get out of the way. So you can do that kind of stuff, but you also search up your lands a good deck. Against Dredge, I had an Amulet and I played a bounce land, and I like played Azusa and I transmuted and I got a Bojuka Bog and I played a Bojuka Bog, and I was like, all right, Bojuka Bog you. So the searching up the land part is something that just in the more recently when I started playing the deck, I've started really thinking about more, because before I was kind of like, it's best if I always think about this for like the 4 cards we just mentioned, including Summoner's Pact. But it really is helpful because the lands have so much utility as well, and searching them up is super valuable. Searching up Cavern of Souls against a heavy counterspell hand can be very impactful.
Yeah, toolboxes within toolboxes in this one. Let's talk about the sideboard really quick. Do you want to kind of talk about what you like in different matchups, the kind of matchups you were worried about when building the sideboard?
Sure. So I'll talk about the one of the cards that people are kind of off right now that I kind of like, and I kind of have a weird reason for it too. So I think that this slot right here is, you have a spot where you can put something that's card advantage-y. So I have Tireless Tracker. People have been trying Hydroid Krasis. Some people choose to go over the top of their decks and play Emrakul as they're like, I'm not really card advantaging you, but like I have this unbeatable end game, and getting to 13 mana is surprisingly easy in this deck, especially
you're talking about the
Promised End.
Yeah.
Yes, my bad. Sorry, Emrakul, the Promised End. So some people are playing that card in this kind of slot. I play Tireless Tracker for a couple of reasons. 1, I think the synergies with your deck and the bounce lands make it play really well. 2, it's easy to get down before a Blood Moon or any kind of those effects. And a lot of the grindy decks actually have land destruction and land interaction effects, so getting this card down is important. And 3, I have a clue token of myself, and I was like, well, I want to play with my clue token. So I played a Tireless Tracker. But I honestly don't think it's that bad. I was testing Hydroid Krasis. I think that card's kind of interesting in the deck, but I think it requires a little bit too much going right for my liking. And Tireless Tracker, when things are going right, it's unbeatable. And when things are going wrong, it helps you get out of it. So I really like Tireless Tracker for that reason. The 1 Rex Sage I think is uncuttable. You have to play the Rex Sage. You bring it in against, and if you think your opponent might have Blood Moon, Dampening Sphere, and Ensnaring Bridge to a lesser extent, because you can get around that in other ways with like Walking Ballista. But if they have any sort of enchantment or artifact that might mess up your game plan, you basically have to bring in Rex Sage. So I think it's uncuttable. We have the 1 Ramunap Excavator. This is for like Tron matchups for people that try and land destruction you. It's pretty good. I haven't actually brought it in like the last 2 or 3 weeks, but every time I look around me, there's always just like these Field of Ruins everywhere and stuff. And I'm like, well, I can't cut this card, and I need it against Tron to Ghost Quarter lock them. So I think it is a flex spot, but it's a flex spot that I feel is sort of soft locked right now. Rook Thar, the Unbowed, is for combo decks, including Burn, because I consider Burn a combo deck that uses its burn spells. It really is just this unbeatable threat. And if you don't know, Rook Thar says whenever a player casts a non-creature spell, that player takes 6 damage. And it's very easy just to get a Rook Thar out and be like, okay, you have like 2 spells to beat me. Go. And a lot of times people just can't do that in Modern. It's just not reasonable. So Rook Thar is powerful there. Hornet Queen is a concession to the human and the spirit deck going on the rise. I've seen that deck popping up more and more recently, which is interesting because I feel like they have bad Thing in the Ice matchups and like they have just bad against Arc-like decks, but they keep seeing play. I know Jerry mentioned on the game podcast that he actually likes the deck right now. And so I normally try to stay aware of what people are talking about. And even though I feel like the deck isn't super well positioned, it's a deck people like, they have experience with, and it's decent enough against enough of the field. So I wanted to have a card for that kind of matchup. The EE is another concession to human style of decks. EE is just good against things with low CMC, and we have the Academy Ruins package in our deck. So we board in the land so we can loop EE, we can loop Walking Ballista against decks that try to get rid of our Primeval Titans, and we can loop Tormont Scripts against graveyard decks. So those all kind of go in the same package. Tormont Script, we just talked about for graveyard decks, pretty self-explanatory. I actually don't bring in all of them against the Arc-like decks, specifically the blue-red one. Against the mono-red, I will bring in both of them because of Bedlam Reveler. But blue-red, they have Drake and stuff like that, and they kind of come prepared for you to have hate. So it's something that you need to be aware of. But against Dredge and all these other decks that are graveyard-focused, it's quite nice. The 3 of Braids is another concession to human-style decks, but also people have random artifacts like Dampening Sphere that a lot of aggressive decks will have Dampening Sphere, which turns off your bounce lands. They make them make 1 colorless mana, and it's harder to double spell, and double spelling is something you do a decent amount when you have so much mana. And it's an answer to creature decks, so a Breed is powerful there. It also helps shut out anyone that's still trying to do hardened scales nonsense. And then we have 3 negates. This spot is weird. I see a lot of people doing different counter spells. There's like 1 negate, 2 spell pierce, 2 negate, 1 spell pierce. I think it matters a lot in what you're trying to beat. And what I was trying to beat was the mirror match, because I played the mirror a couple times and I had spell pierces and they had negates, and I was like, I can never win. We stare at each other the whole game and they just wait till they have 2 more mana and they fight. And I lose. And I can never go for it because I have negates. So I was afraid that the mirror might pick up in popularity. And there are also just hard combo decks that negate gives you access to beating. Any deck that has like a way to generate lots of mana, like Storm and stuff like that, if you negate, that will slow them down. And it's also good against like some of the hate cards that we talked about. Like I played against Grishlebrand, and it was nice to have 2 negates in my deck with 2 negates to have in my deck just to answer their combo pieces. But also that deck typically plays Blood Moon, so I had a backup answer to Blood Moon. So negate, I think you could play any sort of anti-combo card you want. I'm a really big fan of negate just in general in Magic, so maybe I'm a little biased, but I love that hard answer in this deck. And a lot of people have kind of caught on that we were playing Spell Pierce as Amulet players, so they'll sometimes wait, and then you really get them with a negate, because now your negate's like double Time Walk, and that's very powerful.
Awesome. That was in depth. I love it. Yeah, but, I mean, this is it. Let's wrap it up. Is there anything specific that you want to mention before we close this out? Anything around any of the cards that we maybe didn't get to in the main? We kind of talked about the different toolboxes. We talked about why Courser's in the deck, why the one-ups are in the deck. Anything else you want to cover?
I would say this. If you think you like the sounds of playing this Amulet Titan deck, but you hear all the time the deck's too hard or whatever, I would say proxy it up. Give it a chance. Watch a couple of coverage matches. Go to YouTube and search up Amulet Titan games. There's been a lot of them recently with Edgar Malgahand and I forget. There's another person, Daryl Ayers, I believe, is the other Titan player that's been doing very well in the SCG Tour. Watch their games. Just kind of learn, practice it a little bit. It's not so the hard games are really hard, but that's true of every deck in Magic. So don't let that scare you. If you think you like this deck, try and learn it. It's a lot of pattern recognition and being like, I have these 4 cards, so I can do this. And if you think you like the sounds of that gameplay, I think this deck is very well positioned right now. You have no bad matchups, meme, and it's just very fun to play. So that's what I would say. And I would say also take your time and make sure you think about what you can be drawing with the deck. Those would be the 2 things I'd want to say before we left.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody so much for watching and listening. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Go leave a review on iTunes if you're listening there. And don't forget to check out Mason on the Even Odds podcast every week.
See you there.